Three heads, old young. Three heads, old young. Two heads, one tail, young yin. Two tails, one head, young yang. Two heads, one tail, young yin. Two heads, one tail, young yin. Start out by reading some poetry from Immortal Sisters. Secrets of Taoist Women. The writings and poems of 6 distinguished Taoist women adepts writing between the 4th and 12th centuries, including the legendary Sun Bu'er. These translations shed light on the spiritual methods used by these women and illustrate the prominence of the feminine in Taoism. Poems by Wu Kalun. My mind is like a jade jar of ice, never invaded by even half a mote of dust. Though the jade jar be obscured without, I pay no mind at all. On the terrace of immortals, I climb straight to the highest level. Notes. Here, jade and ice are symbols of purity. Dust is a symbol of material sense objects. Favor and disgrace are meaningless. What's the use of contending? Drifting clouds do not obstruct the shining moonlight. Let the ox and horse be called. To both I can respond. But how could I let a speck of dust into the city of mind? Notes. Drifting clouds are Confucian metaphors for status and wealth, Buddhist metaphors for delusion. The moonlight symbolizes the clear, cool light of enlightened awareness. The ox and horse are the ox head and horse face wardens of the underworld that reward good and punish evil. My body lives in the city, but my essence dwells in the mountains. The affairs of a puppet play are not to be taken too seriously. When the polar mountain fits into a mustard seed, all the words in the universe may as well be erased. It is said that the great recluse lives in the city while the lesser recluse lives in the mountain, emblematic of the idea that true transcendence does not depend on favorable external conditions. Mundane behaviors are described as affairs of a puppet play insofar as they are controlled by conditioning rather than autonomous individual decisions. The image of the immense polar mountain fitting in a mustard seed comes from Buddhism and represents the attainment of mental freedom through experiential realization of universal relativity. Poems by Fan Yunaqua. The image of the creative is firmness. The virtue of the receptive is flexibility. Meditation is first sought in stabilization. With a clear ladleful of the water of the jade pond, why should the bright moon need the adornments of 7 jewels? Our first trigram or bottom trigram or inner trigram is going to be read in our primary hexagram as solid, solid, broken, or whole, whole, open. Our old yang lines will transform to young yin lines and give us a secondary hexagram. For the time being, they're read as solid, solid, broken, which is dewy, lake, or marsh. Dewy is lake and marsh, abundant energy that teems with life. She is the impulse to communicate, share and exchange, and delights in both inner and outer conversation. She brings things into circulation and gives them voice. This is the sheer enjoyment of participating in life to the full, expressing ourselves and hearing others and satisfying our desires. Lake is the youngest daughter, spirit of the fertile west and of autumn. Our upper trigram of our primary hexagram will be read as solid, broken, broken, or whole, open, open, which is the trigram Zen thunder. Thunder is shock, upheaval, and the spark of the new. In old Chinese belief, thunder slept in the earth over winter and erupted from it in spring, awakening living things into new growth. Thunder is our basic drive for renewal. He inspires initiative and decisive action. He is the stimulus that sets things in motion. He is the eldest son in the Trigram family, the first connection of heaven, potential, with earth, realization. Yang makes itself known here, emerging into the field and beginning to grow. Thunder belongs to the east and to spring. Zen thunder above dewy lake or marsh gives us hexagram. $54. Once our changing lines change, that being our first and second lines, once they transform to yang yin, it will give us open, 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 or solid, solid, solid. This is Qian, heaven. Qian is, oh, no. They'll transform to broken, 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 yeah. So, that's not Qian heaven, that's Kun earth. Kun is earth, open to receive and support what comes to her, providing for its full development. She makes inspiration manifest, gives it form, and sustains its growth. Earth is available to be used, ready to lend her strength to the work without limit. She protects and accepts all things in their totality, present and potential, in an unconditional embrace. Earth is mother, found in the southwest and the harvest time of late summer and early autumn. Once we have Zen thunder above Kun earth as our second hexagram, this will give us hexagram 16. The titles for these will be taken from the Taoist I Ching, written by Liu Yiming in 1796. He was a Taoist adept. And the titles will also, in this book, have brief little explanations in the front here. So our primary hexagram 54 is making a young girl marry, seeing the real within the false. And 16 is joy, proper timing and action. But we will start out reading from Hilary Barrett's I Ching, Walking Your Path, Creating Your Future. I find it to be probably the most basic of the I Ching commentaries. And then we will move on to James Dekorne, who has synthesized several commentaries on the I Ching and given his own helpful editor's notes, which are often very profound. He's a Taoist adept himself. Hexagram 54. Hilary Barrett calls the marrying maiden. Key questions. How can you grow into this situation? What does it mean to you to come second? How sustainable is this? Before we get too far, when we ask a question of the I Ching or consult the oracle, that question will have the general context of how can I act in creative relation with the spirits or forces shaping this moment of time. To get the answer to that, we'll have to understand how the parts of our reading work together. The key to understanding a reading is to know your way around its main components, how they fit together, and the different roles they play. If your reading includes changing lines, then you will need to understand primary hexagram, relating hexagram, and changing lines together. The two hexagrams in conversation with one another map out your whole answer. The primary hexagram shows you quite directly what your answer involves. The relating hexagram generally describes what the answer is about for you. It sets the primary hexagram in a broader context, an influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. If the two hexagrams map out a landscape for you, then the changing lines stick a pin in that map to say you are here, or at least here are some places you may find yourself. They are the immediate answer to your question. As the most specific, focused part of a reading, their message always takes precedence over all other elements. For example, the primary hexagram might describe a reassuringly secure situation, but a changing line could warn how insecure your position is within it. Our changing lines are 1 and 2. Oracle, the marrying maiden, to set out to bring order, pitfall. No direction is fruitful. A young girl, not yet a woman, comes home to her new husband's house. A nobleman of old China would marry his first wife with great ceremony. She would go to her new home accompanied by a group of female relatives who became second wives. These are the marrying maidens. They are present simply to make relationships easier and have no status of their own. As a marrying maiden, you have accepted a relationship where you come second. You are only here to play a supporting role. It would be disastrous to try to shape the situation to fit your own needs. You are too junior, not yet ready to exert influence. There is no point in your setting intentions or making plans. All you can do is to feel your way, adapt, and find your place, without originating any action or having any agenda of your own. Image. Above the lake there is thunder, the marrying maiden. A noble one through ever-flowing endings knows what wears out. The lake is stirred and awoken by thunder, the vibrations traveling deep through the water. The noble one is inwardly as fluid as the lake, always open and responsive. So the shock of the new quickens her heart to a new awareness, and she senses the currents of change. She sees how things are complete also. She sees how things that are complete are also flowing like water, and this is how they endure, as the generations of a family endure, and as the spreading vibrations from the thunder reveal what is flawed. She also gains a direct and sure knowledge of what is too brittle to last. Sequence. The marrying maiden follows from hexagram 53, gradual progress. Making progress must mean a time to come home, and so the marrying maiden follows. To come home also means to marry. The gradual progress is associated with the ceremonies of marriage. However gradual or careful the preparations, now comes the moment of transition into a new life. Instead of being able to change her circumstances gradually to keep pace with her inner development, the marrying maiden has to develop herself to catch up with the sudden and complete change in her circumstances. We'll turn to our supporting hexagram, and then we'll come back to read our changing lines. Supporting hexagram is 16, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context. an influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. 16, Hilary Barrett calls enthusiasm. Key questions. What do you imagine? What inspires you? How can you use your enthusiasm constructively? Oracle, enthusiasm. Fruitful to set up feudal lords and mobilize the armies. The Chinese word for enthusiasm contains an elephant, a character that also means image. The elephant is magnificent, strong, a source of delight, and also unpredictable and potentially dangerous. Imagination and anticipation move us with ease. With them, we can be motivated and inspired, or we can be carried away by the power of our own story. The energetic charge of enthusiasm can be used to set great things in motion. It is good to use it to expand and enrich our experience by extending our network of communication and support, marshaling your resources ready for future challenges. And it is also good to use such structures to channel the motive power of enthusiasm and keep it from running amok. Then its brightly colored images can be woven securely into the larger patterns and meanings of life. Image. Thunder bursts forth from the earth. Enthusiasm. The ancient kings composed music to honor virtue. They celebrated and worshiped the Supreme Lord, joining with their ancestors. Thunder bursts forth from the quiet earth in spring, waking the plants, stirring everything into growth. The ancient kings channeled the joy of spring into music. Singing with the thunder, the people participated in ever-rising energies. Their spontaneous emotion becomes part of a rich and subtle fabric of relationships. The harmony of music, veneration for the supreme divinity, and the family of the ancestors. Sequence. Enthusiasm follows from Hexagram 15, integrity. One who possesses greatness and is also capable of integrity is naturally enthusiastic. Integrity grounds enthusiasm, giving its potent images the foundation in ordinary reality that makes them visions rather than fantasies. Someone who has an authentic vision of great potential cannot help but be enthusiastic. And now we will turn back to read our changing lines, which are the most focused part of our reading. They put a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here are some places you may find yourself. They take precedence over all of the other elements. And our changing lines each have their own individual contexts. So the context of changing line 1 is inklings, just beginning to sense what could be involved or needed. And the context of changing line 2 is the heart's perception, the emotional center, where you make and feel connections. So with our primary hexagram 54, the marrying maiden, we will read changing lines 1 and 2. 1. Maiden marries as a younger sister, lame, can still walk, setting out to bring order, good fortune. You start out at a disadvantage, laboring under a handicap, but the important thing is that you do start out. There may be some things you cannot fix or heal, and some things that will never come easily. But when you are aware of your limitations and understand how hard this will be, then it is good to take charge and set to work. As you do what you can, those disadvantages and handicaps lose their power to trap you in I can't. You find the freedom to move and create change. And then changing line 2. With one eye, can see. A hermit's constancy bears fruit. With one eye, you have a single and undivided point of view. You focus to the exclusion of all distractions. The disadvantage, of course, is that your perception is limited. You do not see the whole picture or not in 3 dimensions. If you locate your security outside yourself when your vision is so limited, You can expect some unpleasant surprises. It is better to be like the hermit, self-sufficient, not attempting to change the situation, but staying quietly loyal to your own insight. The hermit has inner independence. She is the same person whether or not anyone is watching. Now to James Dekorne. He's synthesized several commentaries and put in helpful editor's notes as well. And I've put links to his site in the description box below. I won't be reading everything that he puts here. It can be a bit. Just the stuff that seems super appropriate to the reading. 54 he calls propriety or making do. This is our primary hexagram again. Other titles might be the marrying maiden, the symbol of the marriage of the younger sister, the marriageable maiden, the marrying girl, subordinate, the second wife, converting maidenhood, returning maiden, marrying a maiden, unilateral action, impropriety, improper advances. And a quote from D.F. Hook, deals with life and death, sex and birth. It contains a warning about a person or situation. It deals essentially with discrimination, the first step on the path without which we are useless. Judgment, leg. Propriety indicates that action will be evil and in no wise advantageous. Ritsuma/Karcher, converting maidenhood, chastising pitfall, without direction. Harvesting. Without direction, harvesting is, in order to take advantage of the situation, do not impose a direction on events. This hexagram describes your situation in terms of the changing status of someone who cannot control their circumstances. It emphasizes that finding a real field of activity through accepting this imposition is the adequate way to handle it. Wu, marrying a maiden indicates that it will be foreboding to make moves. There is nothing to be gained. The image, leg. The waters of a marsh with thunder over it form the hexagram of propriety. The superior man, in accordance with this, having regard to the far distant end, knows the mischief that may be done at the beginning. Cleary, 2. Thunder over a lake, marrying a young girl. Developed people consider lasting results and know what is wrong. The way developed people handle things is that before they take the time to ask how to start something, they first consider lasting results. If they think of lasting results, they know what is wrong with acting prematurely, like marrying an immature girl. If you understand the meaning of this, you can apply it to government and to contemplating mind as well. Wu, there is thunder above the marsh. This is marrying a maiden. Thus, the Junsi, or chief son or superior person, in the pursuit of lasting excellence, realizes the flaws and corrects them. Commentary. Confucius/Leg. In the marriage of a young bride, the proper relationship between heaven and earth is seen. Nothing could grow or flourish if heaven and earth did not unite. The marriage of a young bride is therefore both the commencement and goal of humanity. But here, the desire of pleasure employs movement to attain union. This action will be evil because the lines are in inappropriate places, and the magnetic 3 and 5 are mounted on dynamic lines. Leg. The Chinese phrase for this hexagram might be equivalent to the English giving in marriage. But there are some special meanings in this case which must be understood. The judgment gives a bad auspice because the trigram of the youngest daughter is beneath the trigram of the eldest son. Since the action of the hexagram begins with the lowest trigram, we have two violations of propriety. First, the marriage is initiated by the woman and her friends. She goes unilaterally to her future home instead of the bridegroom coming to fetch her. Second, the parties are unequally matched. There is too great a disparity in their ages. In addition, all the lines in the hexagram except the top and the bottom are in places inappropriate for them. Some commentators insist that the symbol of the contracting of a marriage in this hexagram sets forth some principles which should obtain in the relation between a ruler and his ministers. The growth of things in nature from the interaction of heaven and earth is analogous to the increase of mankind through the interaction between male and female in marriage. The Confucian editors reconcile this good auspice with the unfavorable judgment by saying, the interaction of the yin and yang cannot be dispensed with, but we ought to be careful about it in the beginning in order to prevent mischief in the end. The error here is that the desire for the marriage originated with the lady and that she is heedless of the disparity in their ages. Notes and paraphrases. Judgment. Propriety means that unilateral action is inappropriate. The superior man understands that the work is guided from within and that choices which ignore this truth can only retard its progress. Present actions originate future consequences. Pay heed to your choices. The traditional name of this hexagram is Marrying Maiden, a title which does not convey to modern Western readers the subtlety of its symbolism. Blofeld says this hexagram is on the whole a most unfortunate omen. We must not suppose that it deals only with marriage. What is said about the maiden symbolizes in some way or other what we may expect for ourselves within the context of our inquiry. The figure is certainly difficult, but unfortunate only if its import is resisted or denied. Any portrayal of our situation which eliminates illusion, however painful the realization, must be regarded as a positive lesson. Although the Confucian commentary describes this hexagram in terms of self-seeking aspiration, the wretched protagonist of the figure is not invariably culpable, and neither judgment nor image imply this. In addition to being at the very bottom of the social pecking order, the maiden is portrayed as half-blind, crippled, and a slave. Although condemned by the commentators for importuning a marriage that would raise her status, a close reading of the lines reveals that only the sixth place suggests possible impropriety. The others all contain advice about how one of extremely low status should cope with restricted circumstances. The hexagram therefore can deal with either of two possible conditions, those involving propriety and those involving making do as an adaptation to adversity. In the first instance, it is useful to compare the symbolism here with that of the preceding hexagram of gradual progress. There we see the organic progression of the work allegorized as the proper marriage of a young woman. In this case, gradual progress has been turned upside down and the symbolism reversed. This young woman improperly pursues a marriage on her own initiative. Psychologically interpreted, it can be regarded as an image of the ego pushing its own agenda or desire for union. A quote from E.C. Whitmont in The Alchemy of Healing. The ego may move in directions and toward actions that are at variance with the intentions and standards of the self. The mature adult needs to recognize eventually his or her relative limitedness vis-a-vis the self field and the cosmic organism of which he or she is but a cell. We are subject to the ordering and growth intents of the entelechy of the whole. To recognize our relative limitedness vis-a-vis the self field is to renounce our claim to unilateral action. Though the ego ardently desires a marriage with the self, only the self can initiate such a union. Tao Te an early Neo-Confucian, makes an observation which illuminates Legg's image. The superior man, in accordance with this, having regard to the far distant end, knows the mischief that may be done at the beginning. The most important things in the world are tendencies. Tendencies may be strong or weak. If a tendency is extremely strong, it cannot be controlled. but it is possible to control it quickly if one realizes that it is strong. To control it requires effort. If one does not realize early enough, it will not be easy to apply effort. To receive this hexagram without changing lines can be an admonition to examine your motives and actions in the matter at hand. Where are you out of line? If no obvious impropriety is involved, it could also portray an essentially impotent predicament. At such times, Ritsema/Karcher's synopsis bears repetition. This hexagram describes your situation in terms of the changing status of someone who cannot control their circumstances. It emphasizes that finding a real field of activity through accepting this imposition is the adequate way to handle it. Suggestions for meditation. Compare propriety with hexagram number 53, gradual progress. Then compare them both with hexagram number 31, initiative. What are the similarities in their ideas? Now look at hexagrams number 11, 17, and 22 and observe the overall philosophy which begins to emerge. And then our secondary or supporting hexagram 16, James Dekorne calls enthusiasm/self-deception/repose. Other titles might be the symbol of harmonious joy, repose, happiness, providing for or provision, excess, merriment, self-confidence, contentment, harmonize, excitement, intemperance, self-deception. A quote from D.F. Hook: repose in the absolute confidence that the action now being taken is right. Also refers to music. Again, this hexagram puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. Judgment, leg. Enthusiasm indicates that feudal princes may be set up and the army advantageously mobilized. Blowfold. Repose profits those engaged in building up the country and sending forth armies. This means that perfect certainty as to the rightness of our cause is of great value under the conditions mentioned. The usual meaning of this character is beforehand, or happiness. In the English translation of Wilhelm's version, it appears as enthusiasm. Repose was suggested by the Chinese experts who kindly vetted this manuscript. At first, I felt hesitant about adopting it until I realized that where it is used favorably, it must be understood as the kind of mental repose which follows absolute confidence that the action now being taken is the right one. In lines 1, 3, and 6, however, it clearly means failure to act when action is essential. In line 5, failure to act owing to incapacity. Lu, happiness. It is a benefit to build up the country or business and send the army forth. Receivers of this hexagram should be wary of exhibiting excessive enthusiasm when beginning a new undertaking. If they are not, there will be misfortune. The hexagram also advises that everything necessary for advancement should be made ready. Then if an opportunity presents itself, it should be seized immediately without hesitation. Ritsema/Karcher. Providing for. Harvesting, installing feudatories to move legions. This hexagram describes your situation in terms of what is needed to meet the future. It emphasizes that accumulating strength through foresight and prudence so things can be fully enjoyed is the adequate way to handle it. To be in accord with the time, you are told to provide for. The image, leg. Thunder exploding out of the earth, the image of enthusiasm. The ancient kings, in accordance with this, composed their music and honored virtue, offering it especially to God when they worshipped him at the service of their ancestors. Wilhelm/Baines. Thunder comes resounding out of the earth, the image of enthusiasm. Thus the ancient kings made music in order to honor merit and offered it with splendor to the supreme deity, inviting their ancestors to be present. Ritsema/Karcher. Thunder issuing forth from earth impetuously, providing for. The earlier kings used a rousing delight to extol actualizing Tao. exalting worship supreme above, using equalizing the grandfather predecessors. And to actualize Tao is the ability to follow the course traced by the ongoing process of the cosmos, linked with acquire. D is acquiring that which makes a being become what it is meant to be. Wu, thunder breaks out above the earth with a boom. This is merriment. Thus the ancient kings used music to praise virtues, accomplishments, and made grand offerings to the supreme being to be accompanied by their ancestors. Commentary. Confucius/Leg. Enthusiasm shows one dynamic line, inspiring responsive obedience in all the others. Devoted obedience takes action. Such obedient action conforms to natural law and creates order and discipline in the people. The planets and the seasons follow their natural cycles. The sages similarly obey the laws of their nature, and the people acknowledge their regulations and punishments as just. Leg. Enthusiasm shows harmony and contentment throughout the kingdom, a time when the people rejoice in their sovereign and readily obey him. At such a time, his appointments and any military undertakings would be hailed and supported. Because he is close to the fifth place of dignity, the dynamic fourth line is seen as the chief executive officer of the ruler. The ruler has confidence in him, and all of the magnetic lines yield their obedience. Obedience is the attribute of the lower trigram, which here takes the initiative and uses movement, which is the attribute of the upper trigram. The symbolism of the image is more obscure than usual. The use of music at sacrifices is supposed to assist in producing the union between God and his worshippers, as well as the present and past generations. Notes and paraphrases. Judgment. Delegate authority and gather your forces. The superior man synchronizes his will with the intent of the self via the principles of the work. Enthusiasm is the reverse of the preceding hexagram of temperance. In temperance, we saw the calm strength of a mountain concealed within the earth. In enthusiasm, we see thunder exploding out of the ground into the sky. The strength that was formerly tempered and restrained is now released. It is significant to note that while every line of temperance is more or less favorable, every line of enthusiasm is either negative or cautionary. Even the generally positive fourth line carries a hint of warning about doubt. Negatively, self-deception, the passion of true believers, seems to be what this hexagram is portraying. The figure often suggests a callow or diluted buoyancy, the kind of outlook associated with romantic idealists. In its most negative aspect, enthusiasm is intemperance, the exact opposite of the moderation and restraint shown in the preceding hexagram. The behavior of an untrained Great Dane puppy suddenly bursting into a formal dinner party could be described as enthusiasm, but hardly a desirable form thereof. The lower trigram of obedient devotion has suddenly employed the action and energy of the upper trigram of thunderous shock to express itself. This is inconsistent with the code of the superior man. Conversely, in its most positive sense, enthusiasm suggests the surety of total self-confidence. Blofeld translates this as repose, explaining that the name was suggested to him by his Chinese advisors. We begin to understand this subtle distinction when we compare the seemingly obscure connection with music in the image with a passage from Chuang-Tzu. He who understands the music of heaven lives in accordance with nature in his life and takes part in the process of change of things in his death. In repose, his character is in harmony with the yin principle. In activity, his movement is in harmony with the yang principle. Therefore, he who understands the music of heaven is not blamed by heaven or criticized by men. It is said, in action he is like heaven, in repose he is like the earth. Because his mind has found repose, therefore the creation pays homage to him. To understand the music of heaven is to attain repose, which is another way of describing the tranquility that comes with furthering the intent of the self. The only dynamic line in the hexagram is in the minister's place, just below the fifth line ruler. He has the confidence of his sovereign, and his actions therefore accord with heaven. We can turn to the Stoics to find an illustration of this idea. And a quote from Epictetus: My will is simply that which comes to pass, for I esteem what God wills better than what I will. To him will I cleave as his minister and attendant, having the same movements, the same desires, in a word, the same will as he. Thus we see that the hexagram can describe either one of two opposite conditions: the intemperate enthusiasm of ego confidence, a synonym for self-deception, or the calm repose of true self-confidence, capital S. The 15th and 16th hexagrams, each the inverse of the other, represent magnetic and dynamic aspects of the same general idea. Enthusiasm, when it emanates from the self, is just temperance in action. Now we will go back to our primary hexagram and read our changing lines 1 and 2, which are our most focused part of the reading and take precedence over all other elements. They put a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here are some places you may find yourself. And again, it's our primary hexagram 54, which James Dekorne calls propriety or making do. The general context of our changing lines. Changing line 1 has a general context of inklings, just beginning to sense what could be involved or needed. And changing line 2 has the general context of the heart's perception, the emotional center, where you make and feel connections. Changing line 1, leg. The first line dynamic shows the young woman married off in a position ancillary to the real wife. It suggests the idea of a person lame in one leg who yet manages to tramp along. Going forward will be fortunate. Blowfold. The maiden marries and becomes a concubine. The lame can walk. To advance brings good fortune. Some advance is indicated, but not a very splendid one. To become a concubine is doubtless better than remaining single. To walk with a limp is better than not walking at all. Neither is greatly to be desired. Lu. The marrying maiden is to be a concubine. A crippled man can walk. Undertaking is good fortune. Even with limited ability, a person will achieve his undertakings by depending on someone influential. Cleary. 1. Marrying off a young girl as a junior wife. The lame can walk. It is good to go on. The time is not right, but her virtue is right, and she does not do anything improper. This represents the ability to maintain rectitude when the time is not right. Commentary. Confucius/Leg. That she is in a subordinate position is the constant practice in such a case. Even though lame, she can render useful service. Wilhelm/Baines. The marrying maiden is as a concubine because that gives duration. A lame man who is able to tread because they receive each other. Leg. A feudal prince was said to marry 9 ladies at once. The principal of them was the bride, who was to be the proper wife, and she was attended by 2 others, virgins from her father's harem, a cousin and a half-sister, a daughter of her father by another mother of inferior rank. Under line 1, the young woman of the hexagram appears in the inferior position of this half-sister, but the line is dynamic, indicative of a female of firm virtue. The mean condition and its duties are to be deplored and give the auspice of lameness. But notwithstanding, the secondary wife will in a measure discharge her service. There will be good fortune. Notwithstanding apparent disadvantages, an able officer may do his ruler good service. It is the constant practice for such a case in the Confucian commentary seems to mean that an ancillary wife has no right to the disposition of herself, but must do what she is told. Thus it is that the mean position of the younger sister does not interfere with the service that she can render. Notes and paraphrases. Sue. At the outset, the man in a relatively low position enjoys the confidence of the prince. Outwardly, he keeps tactfully behind the official ministers. Although this diminishes his status, he continues to perform valuable services for the state. Wing, your position within this situation is low in stature, but you have the good fortune of being taken into the confidence of a superior. If you remain subordinate, you will assure your security. You can then influence the situation using tact and reserve. Editor. This line does not lend itself to the usual gender designation employed in this book. Generally speaking, the line should be read as symbolic of any situation in which one is in a subordinate, powerless position. Often it suggests the need for some sort of compromise in the situation at hand. A quote from E.C. Whitmont in The Symbolic Quest. In that game of interaction which the ego plays with the objective psyche, it appears as if the cards were dealt by the unconscious, since it is the unconscious which gives rise and shapes the strength or weakness of the ego. The ego's responsibility is to do the best that it can with the hand it is dealt. And Changing Line 1 is broken down into two possible succinct definitions by James Dekorne, A and B. A, an image of making do with what you have, get by as best you can. And B, although in a weak and powerless position, you can still render service to the work. And then we'll go to Changing Line 2. Leg. The second line dynamic shows her blind of one eye and yet able to see. There will be advantage in her maintaining firm correctness of a solitary widow. Blowfold. The one-eyed man can see. Righteous persistence brings advantage to the recluse. It is not unusual for a one-eyed man to see, more or less, or for a recluse to benefit from persistence in his meditations and devotions. Neither of them symbolizes anything at all remarkable. Commentary. Confucius/Leg. She is not changed from the constancy proper to a wife. Wilhelm/Baines. The permanent law is not changed. Blowfold. As yet, no change occurs in the ordinary course of events. Leg. Line 2 is dynamic in a magnetic place, and her correlate is magnetic in a dynamic place. Both, however, are central in their respective trigrams. With a weak correlate, line 2 can't do much in the discharge of her duties, but if she thinks only of her husband, like the widow who will die rather than marry again, such devotion will have its effect and reward. Though blind in one eye, she still manages to see. Devoted loyalty in an officer will compensate for many disadvantages. Notes and paraphrases. Sue. Devoted loyalty on the part of the man will compensate for many weaknesses on the part of his associates as well. Wing. The situation is disappointing. It is up to you alone to carry on the original vision. Such devotion and loyalty will ultimately bring progress. Editor. The line does not lend itself to the usual gender designations used in this book. Blowfold's Confucian commentary, as yet no change occurs in the ordinary course of events, suggests that although we may not perceive or understand what is going on, we still haven't violated the work. Leg's rendition of the firm correctness of a solitary widow implies virtuous abstinence, not giving one's energy to any force that would compromise our integrity. And a quote from Jung in Psychology and Alchemy. It is high time we realize that it is pointless to praise the light and preach it if nobody can see it. It is much more needful to teach people the art of seeing. For it is obvious that far too many people are incapable of establishing a connection between the sacred figures and their own psyche. They cannot see to what extent the equivalent images are lying dormant in their own unconscious. In order to facilitate this inner vision, we must first clear the way for the faculty of seeing. How this is to be done without psychology, that is, without making contact with the psyche, is frankly beyond my comprehension. And then James Dekorne breaks Changing Line 2 down into two succinct possible definitions, A and B. A is the situation has yet to be has yet to clarify. Go it alone until the way becomes clear. And B, partial vision is better than none. Remain uncommitted and do not depart from your accustomed routine. Now we will turn to Liu Yiming's Taoist I Ching commentary that he wrote in 1796 as a Taoist adept. This is quite alchemical in nature. Hexagram 54, our primary hexagram again, he calls making a young girl marry. Making a young girl marry, to go on will lead to misfortune, no profit is gained. Explanation. Making a young girl marry means intercourse is not proper. In the qualities of the hexagram, above is thunder, movement, and below is lake, joy. Inwardly delighted and outwardly moved, actively seeking enjoyment, behavior obeying emotion, this is like using a girl to seek a son. Yin is first, yang comes after. The intercourse is not proper, so it is called making a young girl marry. This is the hexagram of seeking the real within the false. It follows on the previous hexagram, mountain. Mountain means stopping in the proper place, getting rid of incorrect enjoyment and improper action. Before the primordial in people is spoiled and mixes with acquired conditioning, yin and yang are united. Yang controls yin, yin follows yang. One energy flows. The living potential persists, wholly integrated with the design of heaven. They merge naturally without depending on human effort. Then, when acquired conditioning takes over one's actions, the primal true yang is lost outside. Discriminatory awareness uses consciousness to produce illusions. Yin and yang go awry. The elemental energies get mixed up. Desires stir and emotions arise. The mind gets mixed up with things, delighting in externals from within, inwardly moved by externals. One's inherent true yang is evaporated by other. Self is represented by the east in the province of thunder. Other is represented by the west in the province of lake. The east is the host, essence. The west is the guest, feeling. Lake, seeking thunder, is disturbing essence by emotion. External energy injuring inner energy. Furthermore, lake is associated with metal, governing punishment and killing. Thunder is associated with wood, governing life and merit. When punishment and killing overcome life and merit, positive energy dissipates day by day, and negative energy grows day by day. When this dissipation and growth reaches the point where there is pure negativity and no positivity, even if you want to avoid dying, you cannot. Therefore, if a young girl is made to marry, to go on will lead to misfortune. No profit is gained. So making a young girl marry means using lake to seek thunder, or using emotion to seek essence. Even if they interact, it is not right. Sages have a way to restore the primal while in the temporal. If one seeks lake with thunder, using essence to seek feeling, not only will one not be overcome by emotion, one will also be able to snatch the true yang within feeling and restore it to essence. When feeling returns to essence, punishment turns into merit. Essence loves the righteousness of feeling. Feeling loves the goodness of essence. Essence and feeling united, there is a return to correctness, reverting to the original, going back to the fundamental. The spiritual embryo solidifies, and even when meeting misfortune, it turns to fortune. Then there will be unfailing benefit where before there was none. This is an attempt to explain correctness in the midst of incorrectness. And then to turn to our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all, is joy. It is advantageous to set up a ruler and mobilize the army. Explanation. Joy is happiness. As for the qualities of the hexagram, above is thunder, active, and below is earth, compliant. Acting in accord with the time, active yet also compliant. It is therefore called joy. This hexagram represents summoning yang by yin. It follows on the previous hexagram, great possession. In great possession, strength and understanding are employed together. It is the path of wealth and daily renewal. For wealth to be daily renewed, it is necessary to act in accord with the time. Only then can one succeed. If one can accord with the time, then the promotion of strength can be correct, and the use of intelligence can be appropriate. The firing process does not go wrong. The measure of the elements is regulated. Haste and relaxation are in order, and the advance and withdrawal accord with the appropriate time and measure, reaching effortlessness by way of effort. There is no problem of losing what one has gained. What is the happiness of harmonious action like? As an image of harmonious action, nothing compares to setting up a ruler and mobilizing the army. The ruler is the leader of the nation, and the general is the leader of the army. When the leader is set up in accord with the timing of heaven, then the country is peaceful. When the mobilization of the army is in accord with people's hearts, then the troops are complete. The mind is the leader of the body, like the ruler and the general. As it is beneficial to set up a ruler and mobilize the army for harmonious action, so is it beneficial to rectify the mind and train the body. If one acts in accord with the time, it is beneficial. If one's action is not in accord with the time, it is not beneficial. When it is beneficial, one attains happiness. When it is not beneficial, one is not happy. The path of producing happiness is the consummation of harmonious action. We will turn back to our primary hexagram and read our changing lines, which are the most focused part of the reading, and they put a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here are some places you may find yourself. They take precedence over all other elements. The general context of changing line 1 is inklings, just beginning to sense what could be involved or needed. The general context of changing line 2 is the heart's perception, the emotional center, where you make and feel connections. In hexagram 54, our primary hexagram, changing line 1, reads, marrying off a young girl as a junior wife. The lame can walk. It is good to go on. Explanation. Being strong yet being in a low position is like a young girl marrying as a junior wife. A junior wife is a second wife. The young girl humbles herself as a junior wife. The time is not right, but her virtue is right, and she does not do anything improper. This is like the lame being able to walk. External objects cannot impose any defilement. To go on and practice the Tao on this basis, enjoying what is properly enjoyed, will always bring good fortune. This represents the ability to maintain rectitude when the time is not right. And then our changing line 2. The one-eyed can see. The chastity of a hermit is beneficial here. Explanation. Strength employed with flexibility. Outwardly dark yet inwardly bright is like the one-eyed being able to see. Embracing the Tao and dwelling in seclusion, remaining chaste and single-minded, considering essence and life the one important matter, There will naturally be true pleasure, and one will not care for artificial pleasure. One is upright at all times, effective in all matters. This represents preserving correctness and not getting into what is not right. There's also commentary at the end that is helpful but doesn't include our changing lines that we'll turn to now. Hexagram 54. Making a young girl marry. Thunder above, lake below. There is thunder above a lake, making a young girl marry. Thus superior people persist to the end and know what is wrong. Making a young girl marry means that intercourse is not proper. Above is thunder, below is lake. There is thunder above a lake. Thunder stands for agitation, movement. Lake stands for calm, stillness. Thunder agitating a lake, movement disturbing the stillness. The water of the lake overflows. The intercourse of yin and yang is not proper. This is the image of making a young girl marry. What superior people see in this is that there are true and false yin and yang. There is right and wrong practice. The intercourse of true yin and yang comes about naturally and thus can endure, while the intercourse of false yin and yang comes about through forced effort and hence ultimately cannot last long. Therefore, superior people want to persist to the end, yet first should know what is wrong. Persisting to the end means to persist to the end of eternity. To know what is wrong means to know the degeneracy of what is incorrect. The tradition of connected sayings of the I Ching says, by finding out truth and fulfilling one's nature, one arrives at the meaning of life. The Tao of nature and life is all a matter of determining right and wrong by finding out truth. Finding out truth means finding out the principle of communion of yin and yang. The dividing line between the primordial and the conditioned is but a hair's breadth. On one side is the primordial, on the other side is the conditioned. Conditioned yin and yang always interact, but their intercourse is not correct. It has no conclusion and goes wrong. For example, there are ignorant people in the world who join the energies of heart and genitals, or join the active and passive energy channels up and down the back and front of the body, or cause energy to rise up the spine at midnight and descend down the front of the body at noon, or gather energy from sexual intercourse, or heat lead and mercury together, or regulate their exhalations and inhalations. All of these are recognizing the artificial as real and trying to force communion, imagining that they will thereby live long. Instead, they are hastening death. This is quite wrong, a serious degeneration. If practitioners of the Tao want to persist to the end, they should first know what is wrong. If they know what is wrong, they will not be deluded by the depraved words of false teachers. Then if they seek to persist to the end, there is hope they will be closer. And then our supporting hexagram, again, that puts our primary hexagram in a broader context, an influence and a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. Joy, thunder above, earth below. When thunder emerges, the earth stirs. Joy. Thus did the kings of yore make music to honor virtue, offering it in abundance to God, thereby to share it with their ancestors. Joy is happiness. Above is thunder, below is earth. This is thunder coming from the earth, stirring and rising up. When positive energy prevails harmoniously, all things are pleasantly uplifted by it. This is the image of joy. What the kings of yore saw in this was that virtue is what is commanded by heaven and is the root of human life, so it should be a joy to cultivate and practice it. Therefore, they made music to honor virtue. Joy is that whereby virtue is made harmonious. Virtue is that whereby joy is made complete. If one creates enjoyments without honoring virtue, that is called creating enjoyment in the midst of misery. But by using joy to harmonize virtue, the virtue becomes more exalted. By using virtue to create joy, the joy becomes more harmonious. When virtue and joy coincide, this is called true happiness. The richness of the music of that happiness and joy is sufficient to offer to God and to share with the ancestors. Since what God likes is virtue, and what the ancestors like is virtue too, offerings to God and to the ancestors are offerings of virtue. When one creates enjoyment and happiness without losing virtue, this is obeying God and remembering the ancestors. Obeying God is answering heaven. Remembering the ancestors is repaying our debt. When people are born, they receive their lives from God and their bodies from their ancestors. The body is that whereby life is carried. Life is that whereby the body is completed. Since the body and life are inseparable, repaying our debt is answering heaven. Answering heaven is repaying our debt. When we answer heaven and repay our debt, we can be happy. Such is the effort of finding joy in honoring virtue. How can people be happy without honoring virtue? Now, read a randomly card drawn chapter from the Tao Te Ching to close everything off. '54. And this one is translated by Jia Fu Fang and Jane English. What is firmly established cannot be uprooted. What is firmly grasped cannot slip away. It will be honored from generation to generation. Cultivate virtue in yourself, and virtue will be real. Cultivate it in the family, and virtue will abound. Cultivate it in the village, and virtue will grow. Cultivate it in the nation, and virtue will be abundant. Cultivate it in the universe, and virtue will be everywhere. Therefore, look at the body as body. Look at the family as family. Look at the village as village. Look at the nation as nation. Look at the universe as universe. How do I know the universe is like this? By looking.